Have you ever wondered what gets in the way of a leader leading in the way that he hopes God would help him lead? I mean, have you ever wondered what prevents a leader becoming the leader that God really designed him to be? Well, I think one of those reasons is fear. I think fear has this incredible ability to just swallow a leader's courage and to devour a leader's confidence in God. And if we're not careful, fear can paralyze a leader. And so what I want to talk about today are 3 fears that every leader must face in order for God to use them at their full potential. And so the first fear I want to talk about is the fear of losing. It's the fear of failure. I think that would be probably the number one fear that most leaders have, is that they're going to fail, that they're going to lose, that they're not going to win. But here's the deal. Sometimes when we have that fear, it just absolutely paralyzes us. And so we're afraid to risk, we're afraid of adventure, we're afraid to try new things. But fortunately, we're not alone in this fear. I mean, think of Joshua in the Old Testament. Moses is gone, and now Joshua's got to lead the people. And I think the fear of failure and the fear of losing absolutely gripped his life. And so God gave him some encouragement in Joshua 1:9. This is my command. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord is with you. You see, God's answer for Joshua was to not be afraid, and the way to not be afraid was to realize that the presence of God was going to be with him. And so really an antidote to the fear of losing or the fear of failure is that God promises to be with us. Well, let's talk about the second fear. And the second fear is the fear of losing status or recognition. I think we all know as leaders in the culture where you're ministering that you have a certain platform, that you have a level of respect, and in different cultures it's more, in different cultures it's less. But we need to be careful that we're not using ministry to get our ego needs met. We're not using ministry to gain rank or to gain recognition or to gain status. As a matter of fact, a lot of leaders are so afraid of losing some of that status and some of that recognition that they don't lead boldly for God. And so Jesus warned us about this. In Matthew 6:5, it says, when you pray, don't be like the hypocrites who love to pray publicly on street corners and in the synagogues where everyone can see them. I tell you the truth, that is all the reward they will ever get. See, Jesus warns us against this temptation to seek attention. And so he rejects this kind of approach to ministry that we're afraid of losing recognition or we're afraid of using status. I think we all need to be like John the Baptist, who in John 3:30 said that Jesus needs to become greater and greater, and I need to become less and less. And really, that should be our approach to ministry, that it's all about Jesus. It's all for Jesus. It's all towards Jesus. And we don't have to fear losing rank or recognition. We don't have to fear of losing status. We can be like the Apostle Paul, who says, if you really want to know who I am, I'm a servant. I'm a servant of Jesus, and that's my identity, and that's good enough for me. Now, the third fear we want to talk about is the fear of losing power. You see, whenever a leader is in this pursuit of power, when a leader spends a lot of time trying to gain power, trying to consolidate power, ends up in a lot of power struggles, isn't willing to empower others to lead. Whenever a church ends up being more a battlefield instead of a training field, then there's a problem. There's a problem. And there is this temptation for all leaders, for all of us, to seek power and to control people through power that intimidate us, to use power in an unhealthy way. And again, Jesus warns us about it. Mark 10:42. So Jesus called them together and said, you know that the rulers in this world lord it over their people, and officials flaunt their authority over those under them. And so Jesus, he rebukes and he wants to resist this kind of need for power. And he doesn't want our leadership defined by power. He wants our leadership defined by servanthood. Now, the Apostle Peter, someone who was really a powerful person, listen to what he says. 1 Peter 5:3. Don't lord it over the people assigned to your care, but lead them by your own good example. So Peter says if you're going to use power, use the power of a good example. Don't use power to dominate people. Don't use power to control people. If you're going to use power at all, use power to be a good example of what it means to be a follower of Christ, what it means to be a servant leader of Christ. You see, if you want to be the kind of leader that God created you to be, you really have to look at these three fears. And all of us leaders are tempted to these three fears. We are tempted to the fear of failure. We really are. We're tempted to this fear. We're tempted to the fear of seeking kind of or losing recognition and status. And we're tempted to the fear of using power. But we don't want to go into those things. Instead, we want to trust that Jesus is with us so we can be secure, that our place is really that of a servant, and so Jesus can get greater and greater and we can get less and less, and that we're not going to use power. And the only time we're going to use the power of a good example.